Dr. Brown, hope you're doing great. I'm excited to talk to you just briefly here as we're in Module 2, uh, beginning with Chapter 3, and this concept of branding as I give you the highlights, and I encourage you to read what Blakeman has to say about branding. Brands and branding is something most of us understand. We encounter brands and brandings uh, all throughout what we do on a daily basis. One time I had my daughters, we actually counted how many brand images that we saw on our phones, on billboards, on restaurant signs, and I mean, we quickly got to 100 in a day. So brands and the process of branding is something that we're familiar with. But let's think about a few of the technical terms and how we can use the concept of building a brand or branding to help promote products, ideas, activities, organizations that we may be interested in. I put on the screen here for you just some very common ones we could add to this list. The list would become crazy. And if you'll notice, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter, the brand's image, okay, is actually carried. This is how if you ever study semiotics, which we're not going to get into in this class, it is a visual representation, almost like a stop sign. We know, although some of you may not slow down for them, you know that the shape and the color triggers your mind that means stop, okay? In the same way, these brand representations, the shape and the color tell you that's Coca-Cola, or that's Apple, or that's Adidas, okay? We're so used to this, it almost comes second nature. So you'll find in the text the differentiation between a brand and branding, okay? So, of course, like we're talking about, this sign, this symbol, and then the branding is that product's identity and legacy over time. It's how people have known that brand. For example, I have on today in the summer, I have on, actually had on two different pairs of shoes this morning. Went out and ran early this morning. It is so humid, but our old guys running group got out and did a run this morning of about 5 miles. And I've become very brand loyal to a shoe brand called On, okay? Some of you know that. The Cloud Go is my favorite running shoe for the road. And then I tend to wear another brand for trail running. But anyway, that product's legacy of what people think about it builds loyalty, and it becomes its identity over time. But the On brand or the Nike street shoes that I have on as I'm sitting here doing recordings this morning, each of these have signs and symbols, right? But they also have an identity and a legacy, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. All right, so the reason I do these videos is just to give you a highlight. I'm not trying to regurgitate the chapter, but there's some things that I want you to pay attention to, okay? So brand equity, the reputation or the earned reputation of the brand. Brand awareness, how well it's known. Image or personality, we're going to talk about in a minute. What is a brand's relative loyalty? I am very brand loyal, as you probably are, to several brands. There's reasons for that. For example, I am Toyota brand loyal, almost to a fault. Toyota and Honda, primarily Toyota. I like things that I'm willing to pay a little higher price for something that is least likely to break down. high value on reliability. So I'm a long-term Toyota fan, very loyal. I have a relationship with Toyota. I wear their gear. Okay. Brand positioning is a very important concept, and it's how a consumer rates your product versus the competition. We're going to talk more about that. The chapter talks about how to position your product, and then sometimes the product needs a reposition. It needs to be seen differently against a competitor. The visual verbal is the creative part of the image, and it helps create its personality, or a brand personality, sometimes it's called. Symbols, logos, slogans, color. We're going to talk about this in this lecture and also the next one as we talk about how to create both the color, the symbol, and the word cues that tell a consumer this is really a Nike brand, or this is really a Toyota brand. Okay, so all brands have an image and a personality, and I'd like to just give you a brief example. I went through a phase, actually from growing up years, and then in my 40s, I went through a motorcycle phase. I've since graduated from that, although I still like to ride occasionally. I no longer own a motorcycle, but I'm really into like motorcycle history. Okay, so here's two examples just from this side, and you think of your own examples. Okay, in the 60s, some of the iconic American brands started to face stiff competition from abroad, particularly from British and or UK based bikes, and then also from Japanese based bikes, primarily Honda. Then other brands came in behind Honda, but Honda basically broke the ground, as did for the Japanese bikes, as did BSA and Royal Enfield and others for the British bikes. Okay, but these bikes, you can just look at the ads, okay, and look at the visual verbal, and you notice immediately that the brand personality on the left, you meet the nicest people on a Honda, it's seen as the kind of the nice guy, nice girl, nice person bike, and the BSA on the right is not seen that way or not positioned that way, okay? Your mind immediately goes there, and what's interesting, if you're into motorcycles, a lot of that Honda branding continues in their kind of motorbike category. If you want the reliable, nice folks generally ride Hondas, okay? Other people use different brands, okay? So from the 60s, you can see this. Now, if you go into more modern brands, okay, personality and positioning, immediately when we see Harley Davidson, we think about a group of following, okay? Harley reinforces this personality, okay? Then Harley has faced, starting several years ago, Indian Motorcycles, which actually is a much older American brand, was bought out by Polaris Industries. They bought the rights to the brand and the image, and they kind of resurrected Indian Motorcycles to compete against Harley Davidson. So I tell this story a lot. I love this story because it just talks about personality and positioning. When we lived in Nashville, Tennessee area, there was literally a Harley Davidson dealership on the left side of a 4-lane highway and an Indian dealership on the right side. Okay, it was amazing. You could hear the Harleys on their side of the road. You typically didn't hear the Indians on their side, and you could walk in and you and I both could predict without being there what the people look like. It is a intentional personality and intentionally positioned. We could talk about price points and gear and events and things, but all these are part of that brand's personality as they attempt to appeal to a target. I have a picture here. This is my wife and I riding when Indian was really trying to break into the market. We went to one of their demo days. I rode everything that Indian brought, but this is one of their Cadillac Cruisers. They're called baggers, okay? It's just a heavy 1500 or plus motorcycle that's meant for the interstate. Probably the most fun. I could never afford this motorcycle. It's the most fun Amy and I had as far as being on a motorcycle. Although at the time we were riding a Suzuki Boulevard 1500, a big bike, which was a great and reliable bike. I was just drooling over this Indian, okay? We did when we were looking, we did ride a Harley, also a great bike, but just, anyway, very, very different buying experience, very, very different brand personalities, and you might guess that it might surprise you a college prof is interested in motorcycles, but definitely more down the Indian side of the tracks. So I want you to think about, just as I close this, I just want to give you some highlights from this brand and branding and a couple examples. Think about the key concepts here in this chapter as you read. Brand equity, loyalty, position, and visual verbal is part of this personality. And think about how this applies, or how you could say, okay, hey, I've got an example, or this makeup brand or shampoo brand or car brand or my favorite coffee brand are intentionally about using some of these core concepts in their advertising and marketing. And I think you can come up with some practical examples as I've given you today. Make sure you look really closely at chapter 3. Great concepts. These concepts are not only something we use to observe and critique brands we know, but they are also tools, okay? Tools and concepts that we can use as we stand up branding and marketing for a new product.